silence and some sources, chased amid fusions of wonder, in moments hardly seen forgotten, colored in pastures of chance dancing leaves cast spells of challenge, amused but really thought, reflect from the sea. Dawn of thought transferred through moments of days and the searching of revealing corridors of time, provoking memories, disjointed but with purpose.
Hey, this is Keith. What's up? It's Monday, June 1st, 2009. Want to have a little chat with you about my history as a raw fooder. At the end of next winter in 2010, I'll be a raw foodist for 25 years. And I want to tell you about my journey with that a little bit, because a lot of people have only been raw foodists for a couple years probably. I know David Wolf's only been like, I think 14 years. You know, I got him beat by 10 years. So anyways, my whole entrance into the world of alternative food came from my love of the band Yes. And I first discovered them when I was about 12 years old. My cousin took me to see a concert of theirs, and they're very spiritual, and all their music is very evoking of landscapes and big cosmic sound. And I got into them very quickly, because before that I only heard my dad's taste in music, which was like basically Beatles and disco, you know? And so anyways, I discovered their album called Tales from Topographic Oceans, which was what you were just listening to as we kind of faded this in. And the whole band was vegetarian when they recorded this and the record after that. And I was, as a music kid, I was very, very inspired by that. And I switched over to vegetarianism immediately when I was 13 years old. And so, anyways, the album Tales from Topographic Oceans is very, it's a concept album, and it was based on a footnote that was in this book right here called Autobiography of a Yogi. So you can tell already that the band Yes is like quite, you know, very lofty with what they talk about. Autobiography of a Yogi, of course, when I found out that that the album was based on this book, I of course read the whole thing. Amazing book, looks really thick, reads really easy. This is the guy, Pramahansa Yogananda, is the guy that brought yoga over to the Western world in the late 40s and the 50s. And so anyways, I became a vegetarian, and you know, the band was vegetarian for a long time. And so I stayed, I haven't had meat at all since then. And then, you know, being into Pramahansa Yogananda, and Yes, I got into all this very atmospheric kind of music. And then I discovered this guy who's like a big influence on my own music. This is Klaus Schulze. He's a German synthesizer player and does these huge, beautiful, like, landscapes. His songs are like soundscapes. His songs are like 20 minutes long, 22 minutes long. A lot of times, if you're not hearing my music, you're hearing this guy's music. This really changed me and made me realize that art and music were important things in my life. So anyways, and that's kind of going to be where my diet and my eating went simultaneously with my growth of being into music. So at 22, 9 years later, I discovered Survival in the 21st Century by Viktoras Kulvinskas. I've been going to this health food store since I was 4 years, since I was 18, and discovering all this books and new supplements and all that kind of stuff, and came across that book, and it blew me away, because kind of the way that Viktoras Kulvinskas wrote that book was from this very postmodern hippie kind of a point of view. And so anyways, that went side by side with my whole love of Yes and Pramahansa Yogananda and all that, the way that Viktoras wrote that book. So I wish I had a copy of it right now. But so anyways, anyways, yeah, I never met a raw foodist. I was a raw foodist for like a long time before I think I met my first raw foodist at a Whole Life Expo, which was a expo that used to go on in Los Angeles. It may still go on in Los Angeles. It's related to the Whole Life Times. It's a zine that's about, you know, everything alternative and healthy lifestyles and all that stuff. And that's where I met my first raw foodists. It was like a hippie commune that were selling some kind of a dehydrated something or other. Anyways, so my first raw foodist that I was around was when I started going to see the Grateful Dead, which would have been in about 1988. And I had been all around Los Angeles. There's a couple restaurants that were kind of raw. But when I started hanging around with the Grateful Dead, and they weren't all a bunch of drug users either. And by the way, I was using drugs all the time simultaneously with being a raw foodist. A lot of people really separate those two, and I'm not an advocate. I'm not for nor am I against drugs in terms of advocating them to other people. But for me, it was a very positive thing. I got the whole hippie consciousness thing going, and while I don't do things like LSD anymore, I don't do any of the heavy stuff. As you've heard, I still mess around with marijuana from time to time. Anyways, so the Grateful Dead, that's where I met my first raw foodist, was hanging out. You know, there used to be a big scene where you would, before concerts and stuff like that, you'd get there, the concert would be in the evening, and there'd be people selling all kinds of wares and food, and that was the first time I saw a raw foodist. So anyways, about in 1992, being an electronic musician, I started going to raves, and again, I started discovering this sort of very hippie consciousness again, this sort of postmodern, techno-pagan kind of consciousness, and started hanging out with the whole psytrance, Goa trance scene in the Mojave Desert, and they do these all-day raves, and again, I started running into these raw foodists again, and you know, my partner at the time, we would camp out there, and we would make wheatgrass juice and everything. We had this big battery with a thing called an inverter, which converts direct current from a battery into alternating current. We'd make juice out there and all kinds of stuff, and just, you know, take drugs and be high, and, you know. And I'm saying this because I have my experience with raw foodists before this whole wave of raw foodism that's going on is a lot of people were kind of freaks, you know, they're kind of just this hippie type, and it was something that was very dear and tender to me, because in my regular lifestyle, which, you know, I've never looked normal, I've never been a normal person, I really don't want to be either. Now it's like all these like kind of like soccer moms and stuff like that, and you know, and it's just me. It's all right. I'm not saying that everybody that's a raw foodist needs to be a weirdo like me, but it's definitely something that I'm missing nowadays. In fact, I was at Raw Spirit Fest last September in Sedona, and I got a lot of darn nasty looks from a lot of people, because they were like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" So, anyways, so I definitely